Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If you're new here, my name is Holly. I make food and fitness content, and if you're not new here, welcome back to the channel. We are back home, guys. We are back from New York, which was literally the dream trip. I have never eaten so much pizza in my life, and pastries. Pizza, pastries and coffee were absolutely inhaled, and I feel amazing for it. So for this week's video, I actually wanted to sit down and just have a chat with you guys and go through my running story, because I feel like we've just kind of marked like quite a big occasion. I've just run my second marathon of the year, but there was a whole journey that led up to that point, and I wanted to sit down and basically kind of talk to you guys literally from day one, from run one, and how I completed a marathon less than a year after even starting running. But as well as kind of going through my journey, I'm gonna like intertwine I don't know why I had to do the whole movement then. I'm gonna intertwine some kind of like tips and tricks, so as I'm going through each stage you can kind of see the habits or the mindset changes that I adapted or I implemented in order to keep me going. So hopefully you guys can leave this video knowing all about my running journey, but also take loads of tips and tricks and interject them into your running journey as well. So it's funny, I feel like whenever I talk about my running journey, I talk about summer 2022 when I went on my first run. However, there was a run prior to this, actually 2 years prior to this, in lockdown. I'm sure you'll remember everybody was doing run 5, donate 5. So you ran 5k and then you donated, I believe it was £5 to charity. That run was so unfun. I had such a bad time doing that 5k. I kind of went out with the mindset of like, oh, I have a good level of fitness, I'll be fine, I'll be able to do this. No, I did not. I was not able to continually run, I think, for more than like 30 seconds to a minute. My lungs were on fire. My throat was on fire. I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is horrendous, but I've basically posted that I'm going to do it, so I need to do the 5k. So I think I did it in kind of like intervals. I had to keep stop starting my watch until I completed the 5k. That run went so badly that I then didn't run for 2 years. It put me off running for 2 years. And I feel like it's always important to mention that run, because it shows that like I didn't just start running and have this natural ability and just instantly love it. Like, no, I had to take a 2-year hiatus before I started to love it. So hopefully if you have gone on one run and it has felt awful, you are not alone. The first run is always the worst, but maybe just don't leave it 2 years until you start running again, because that was definitely very traumatic of me. So then 2 years later, June 2022, me starting running came about very randomly. It was before a point where like running was very big on social media, because obviously there are so many people running now, there's so many running influencers, it's amazing and it's so motivational. But the reason I started running wasn't kind of off the back of like seeing anybody else running. And I remember looking outside and thinking like, the weather looks nice, like a run would probably be really nice in this weather, like I can see why people would run if it's like this. And it was just a passing thought. I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, I'm not really a runner, so I'm not gonna go and run. And I think at this point I was kind of a bit sick of my gym routine. I'd been weight training for a few years. I was doing 5 sessions in the same gym every single week, and it just felt a little bit repetitive, and I feel like I just didn't feel very like challenged by it, and I didn't really see that I was making much progress because I wasn't really pushing myself hard enough. And one morning I woke up, and again the weather was amazing, and I was like, I'm gonna run back from the gym because I think it's about 5k, and I looked and it was around 5k. So I was like, I'm gonna do a 5k back from the gym today. So I actually got an Uber to the gym, so I would have to make my way back somehow, whether that was walking, whether it was running, but I decided it was gonna be running. So I got out on this run after my gym session, and it felt just like it did 2 years prior. My lungs were on fire, I had a stitch, I couldn't run continuously, I had to keep stopping, I just wasn't having the best time. But I finished that run and it was just almost like my mentality was so different. Instead of thinking, oh my God, that was so hard, I'm never doing that again, I actually thought, I want to keep going until it's not that hard, and I want to keep going until like I can do that without stopping. So from that point onwards, I ran, but I didn't really run like very seriously. Like I wasn't really taking running that seriously. I was probably doing like 2 runs a week. My aim was just to have that unbroken 5k, which I think I did get like 2 or 3 runs later. And then at that point I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep trying to like increase my distance, but I wasn't following any plan. I was just kind of going with the flow. And 4 weeks later, I ran my first ever 10k. That 10k was such a monumental moment for me, purely because every year before that, I'd always had as my New Year's resolution, this is the year I'm gonna run 10k, and it just never happened. It never materialized. I didn't have the drive to do it. I didn't really have the want to do it. It was just something I felt like I should do. I don't really know. So when I did actually achieve that, and I realized like I was so capable of doing it, and for whatever reason I just hadn't for the past few years, it just felt so amazing, because again, that wasn't a distance I ever thought was achievable for me. And I feel like that 10k and the sense of achievement that I got off that really lit the like running fire in me. I think from that point onwards, like I had definitely caught the running bug. Just having a bit of a reflection on that like period of running, there were definitely a few things that really helped me kind of build up to that distance. Number one, like I do really wish I'd have had a plan. That is essentially why I founded and created the Strong Girl Society running plans, because they are the plans that I wish I had at that point, just to give me a lot more structure, and they definitely would have been a far more seamless journey, and I feel like I definitely didn't do it very seamlessly. But there were a few like tips and tricks leading up to that point that I did always apply into my runs. So the first thing that I did, which I think massively helped, was when I was getting out on these runs, I used this like half out and half back theory. So anytime I would do a run, I would run the distance halfway in one direction. So if I was doing a 6k, I would run 3k in one direction, then I know it's exactly 3 kilometers back. That is such a stress-free way of calculating a route, but it's also really good when you want to start building up extra distance, because you know if you can add like an extra kilometer onto that route, or maybe the next time you just go a little bit further, so you're just always adding on and improving by a tiny percentage every single run. Something else in the beginning of my journey that was super important was music. When I tell you your music or your podcast will make or break your run, it will make or break your run. One thing that I really realized that I needed to do was, some of the time when you're running, you really are flooded with like disbelief, like you really don't feel like you can do it, and it's just because it's tough. Your body is doing things that it's never done before. You're overcoming barriers that you've never been forced to overcome, and you are the only one that can overcome those barriers. Like here's you versus you out there, and sometimes you need to switch your brain off, because your brain isn't the most helpful thing on runs sometimes. So I kind of found that listening to music, specifically songs that I knew all the words to, would really help me, because I would put my headphones in, I would turn the song up, and I would sing along to the song, either in my head or even like sometimes out loud. I would just put that song on, I would listen to it, and your brain can't really focus on like two trains of thoughts, especially when you're running. So listening to that song was just the perfect way of like distracting my brain from what is actually going on, and then at that point all you need to do is put one foot in front of the other. Another huge tip I wish somebody had told me at this point in my run journey was just to run slow. I talk about this all the time, I'm very passionate about it, but running slow really is the key. When you start running, running is not a sprint. Like you do not need to be out there Usain Bolting it, going at 100 miles an hour and completely gassing yourself out, because that's not going to be enjoyable and it's not going to be fun. And I wish someone had literally put a leash around me and pulled me back on some of my runs, because it just made some of them so much harder than they needed to be. And actually running slow, keeping your breathing steady, is better for you. You're building up more endurance in your legs, and it's going to be better for your cardiovascular fitness. Also, like I said, it's just so much more enjoyable to not be out of breath and feeling like you're going to die every 5 seconds on your run. The speed and the pace will come with time. And shortly after running that 10k, I was obviously still like riding on the runner's high. I decided that I was going to do my first half marathon, because I think, like I said, that 10k really showed me like I was capable, and I'd actually just been listening to that negative voice in my head that was telling me that I'm not for far too long, and it was time to listen to the voice in my head that said that I can do things. So we signed up for the Great North Run in Newcastle, and 2 months after running that first 10k, I ran my first ever half marathon. Again, I did this with no guide, with no trainer. It was just me out there planning my own runs on my little routes with the help of my dad, who is a runner. And the way I structured this is basically still the way that I train now. I just did 3 runs a week. I did a short run, a medium run, and a long run, and every single week I would increase the distance of my long run. And I trained up to around 18 or 19 kilometers before the half marathon. So yeah, I trained for my half marathon with those 3 runs a week, and I feel like that for me was the best motivation and such a kick in the right direction. And planning in races is such a good way to keep you ticking over on your running journey, because consistency with running really is key. And sometimes it is hard to be consistent if you don't have a goal in mind, or if you're not aiming towards something, and sometimes you do just need a race in a few weeks to kick you out the door and keep you going. So that was probably one of the best things that I did, was training for that half marathon, because it gave me a taste of what like a training block was like. Even if like I still didn't really like know what I was doing, I was just kind of like out there on these runs, making it up as I went along, wasn't doing any form of like interval training, didn't pay attention to my pace or my times. I was just genuinely running because I enjoyed running and I was excited to try and do a half marathon. And then in September 2022, I completed my first half marathon, and like I said, this was my first ever experience doing like a race or having a race day, and it was very overwhelming, I will say that. And the race itself was really tough. Like, I remember on the day, I definitely prepped enough for it, but race stages are a little bit difficult to manage sometimes, because sometimes you get a bit excited and you go off a little bit too quick, and then towards the end of the run you're really tired because you've went off a little bit too quick. And I just remember at the end of that run, like endurance wise, like my lower body was sore, my lower back was in pieces. But I crossed that finish line, and I'm not gonna lie, initially I was like, I'm never ever doing that ever again. Like, that was awful. Like, I don't know why I put myself through that. Like, I just didn't enjoy it, because I think sometimes with races you have like delayed runners high because you're just in a bit of a pain pit initially. A day later, I booked to run the Paris Marathon, because I think I kind of reflected on it and I was like, wow, like I did that. Like, I dedicated myself to something and I achieved it. And actually I'm the only one to be proud of in this situation, because I've been the one getting myself out there on those runs. So I think I just had this like realization of like, again, I've done something that I didn't ever think I could do. How far can I take this? Like, what else can we do? So yeah, I booked my first ever marathon, which felt like such a distant dream at the time. And I'm not gonna lie, when I initially booked it, I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to do this, but we're just gonna shoot for the moon and I'm gonna do it. And luckily wrote my dad in to do it alongside me. So we plan to do the Paris Marathon 2023 in March. So come January 2023, I started my training block for my first ever marathon. With this, I knew I needed extra guidance. I definitely wasn't going to be able to just fake it till I made it, because I probably wouldn't have made it. So I did actually get a coach for this. I worked with Lucy Davis, who is a really good friend of mine now, and it was probably one of the best things I did in terms of the guidance, because I definitely needed it. And I think with a marathon, like, you do need a plan. I will say that you can't really just make these things up as you go along. I think plans are essential because they help keeping you motivated, but also keeping you injury free. Because I think if I'd have just been kind of left to my own devices, I probably would have like overdone it and ended up injuring myself, or even underdone it and injured myself on the marathon day because I wasn't prepped enough. So with Lucy, I did 3 weight training sessions a week and I did 3 runs. That was a lot. Like, it was a lot on my body and I was spending a lot of time training. I didn't mind doing it at the time. However, we'll go into it, but for the second marathon training block, I did a different split, and I think it worked a lot better for me. It was a lot less like intense and time consuming. So for that first marathon, like I said, I did 16 weeks of training. With that, you have like deload weeks in between that. So I wasn't constantly increasing my distance. There would be like 1 or 2 weeks where I would deload my distance and let my body rest. So that's why 16 weeks I think is a really good chunk of time, because it gives you time to have those almost reset and relax weeks and lets your body like recover properly before you keep pushing it on to the 42.2 kilometers that you're going to run. Running and training for that marathon was probably one of the biggest learning curves of my training plan, because I'd never really done anything that intense or that serious, and I never thought that I ever would. But it definitely opened up my eyes to a lot. And one thing is that if you are running, even if it's a half marathon or a marathon or even a 10k, fuel genuinely is your best friend. Like, you need to be fueling your body, you need to be eating. And that was something that I took really seriously, because if you're running huge distances, you're going to be expending a lot of energy and you're going to be burning through a lot of calories. So you need to be intaking enough food to support your runs. And I think that was something that I really didn't do properly alongside my half marathon training, because I just, like I said, I was kind of going off my own information and what I thought was right. But actually, when I started that marathon block and I had the guidance of Lucy, food was super important, and I was constantly eating in a surplus because I was trying to take on more food than my body was burning, and actually ended up like gaining a lot of muscle alongside running that marathon because I was intaking the right amount of food. I think that training block also showed me that like running isn't all like sunshine and rainbows. Like, it gets a little bit dark sometimes, and it definitely got dark. There was definitely some runs where like I really struggled and felt like I almost couldn't show up for myself. But every single time I had those runs, I came back, I completed the distance, and I got the training done, which I actually think those learning curves, as crappy as they felt in the moment, are so essential. And this is just a reminder that the runs that you fail are actually some of the most important ones, and some of the ones that you will remember forever, because trust me, you will come back and you will smash that distance, or you will smash that time, and it will just show you that you are capable of achieving those things. So there was one, I think it was a 32-kilometer run, and I just broke down. Like, I don't normally like call my dad if I'm crying, but I called my dad like crying my eyes out, and I was like, I can't do it, like I don't know what's wrong with me. And he was like, it's fine, go home, have a rest, get back on it tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll be able to do it. Today is just not your day, and that's fine. And you know what? He was 100% right. I went home, had a little bit of a rest, and the next day I did it. And I did it, I'm not gonna say easily, it was still a bit of a challenge, but I did it and it felt so much nicer than the day before. But actually, every time I struggle on a run now, I look back to that moment and think, but I was capable the day before, because if I did it the day after, I could have done it the day before. It was just my mind that let me down. So almost knowing that now, when I have those really tough moments, I'm like, no, this has happened before and we did it the next day. So we're just gonna show up today and we're gonna keep our mind strong and our mentality positive, and we're gonna get it done. And then yeah, after 16 weeks from January the 1st, I completed the Paris Marathon with my dad. And I would just say that marathon, it was sunshine and rainbows. Like, I just had the best time running that. The last 5K are really where you have to dig deep. Like, that last 5K, it tested me, but I got it done, ran it with my dad, had the best experience, had the best weekend with my whole family. Now, what kind of followed that wasn't the most positive. Post-race blues definitely hit me really hard, and I don't know why, but I went into that race with the mentality that when I run the marathon, my fitness will be at its peak. Not incorrect, it definitely was at its peak. What I didn't really realize was how difficult the recovery process after a marathon can be. Your body has gone through a lot of stress, but also mentally, you've spent 16 weeks focused on this one day and this one race. When that is all finished and done, sometimes you can feel a little bit lost and a little bit confused with your direction. And a lot of time people are like, well, what's next? And you're like, oh, like, I don't know, like, I haven't really thought about that. And I think I thought that I was going to finish Paris and be able to run like 30Ks. I thought kind of like my baseline for long distance runs would be like a 30K run like every week. I thought I had this incredible new lease of fitness that I would never lose, that I would always be incredibly fit, but actually that's not the case. And running 30Ks every single week isn't really that sustainable and probably not really advised, because it's a really long way to run and a lot of stress on your body. And I don't know whether I've ever really spoken about this before, but I did actually book to run the Manchester Marathon 2 weeks after Paris. I had a place and I thought, because my fitness would be so high, I would just smash out another marathon for fun. And actually what followed the Paris Marathon was a really low kind of bulk of motivation. I just think my body took time to recover, as it should. I think I went for like a 5K a few days afterwards, and I found it so tough. Like, I actually think I would say I found that harder than the marathon, and I think that really shook me. Like, I felt really knocked by that and really demotivated by it, because I didn't understand why I felt that way. In hindsight, that is completely normal. Also, why I was running at all 3 days after a marathon, I don't really know what was going on in my brain. So I think after that, I just felt really unmotivated, and I actually went back to LA, and I think the low motivation just kind of like spiraled. I just wasn't in the best pace of like my exercise and my fitness, and I think I was in LA, so I was really busy all the time doing loads of stuff, and running just wasn't really a priority for me, which kind of feels sad now, because I just feel like I would never not have it in my life. But I went a good few weeks where I kind of did like 1 or 2 runs, and I just wasn't enjoying them. I just wasn't having a good time. I think I just felt lost and a bit meh. That is the best way to describe it. I just felt really meh about my running journey. I just didn't really have that much motivation with it. So after that, I was like, right, I'm actually going to make it my mission to kind of get back into my running. And I'm not going to lie, it didn't really click instantaneously. I still was going on runs, and it wasn't actually until my breakup this year when my fire for running really came back. And I think that is because when I was kind of going through stuff in my head, I really needed like a space to work through things, and I needed a space away from my phone, away from my TV, away from social media, away from just kind of like feeling enclosed and trapped. And I would go out on runs, and I really realized how amazing of a space running is for your mental health. I think when I started running, I knew that, but actually running this year and having that space from running has made me so grateful, and I feel like it really saved me from a lot of like dark places, because I don't know why I feel like I'm gonna cry because I feel like when I would feel really low, I would be like, okay, I'm gonna go on a run, and I'm gonna go on this run and through how I feel and really work through my emotions. And 10 out of 10 times I would come back and I would feel so much better, because I'd given myself that space, and it just made me feel so passionate about running again. So I just completely fell back in love with it, but for completely different reasons, and I was just loving it. And then Strava comes knocking on my door. So this is up to the most recent part of my running journey, and Strava came knocking and offered me a place in the New York City Marathon. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, because I'm sure you guys have been with me through the whole journey, but that has been the best block of my running I've ever had. I would actually say I've enjoyed the training more than I enjoyed the actual marathon, because I spoke to you guys about it. That marathon did kick my ass. It was really, really tough, but actually the training was so much fun. And I think that also comes from the fact that I was training using my own guide that I'm going to be releasing. Like, that really gave me like a good bit of like motivation and like inspiration for all my running. And I just feel like I fell back in love with it completely. And with that training block, I ran 3 times a week and did 2 full body sessions a week. And I think maybe that's part of why I enjoyed it a little bit more, because that split is so much, it's still intense. I don't want to say use the word kinda, because I'm still training to run a marathon, so it's still intense, but it just feels kinda, like, I don't know how to explain it. It just feels like a kinda way to train for a marathon. Yeah, I just had the best time training for that race. And even though I said it kicked my ass, because it definitely did, we're now like a week later, and somebody said to me the other day, like, so when's your next marathon? And I was like, I swore on that run that I would take a year off doing a marathon. And now I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll go into running goals in a few weeks. I feel like I need time for like everything to settle in my brain, and then we'll plan the next steps together. But I completed, yeah, my second marathon in my second year of running, which is crazy to me. And running 1 marathon was never something I thought I would ever achieve. So the fact that I've now run 2 within the space of a year, and I've done 27 weeks of training over the course of this year for marathons, is just crazy. And one thing that I've navigated really well that I'm really proud of is my post-marathon journey, because like I mentioned, after Paris, I just really didn't feel like good. I had like a massive dip, and actually post New York, I took a whole week off running. I just did some walking in New York and things like that. And actually, this is my second week back, and I've done 2 runs, and that's what I'm going to cap it out this week, because there's just no point me pushing myself into a place where I hate it again. And I think I now have the realization that like it is going to be a little bit tough. Like, recovery from a marathon is tough, but it will come back. And I think I'm just going into it with like a way kinder mindset, and I'm not beating myself up for not being able to run another marathon 2 weeks later. And that is my running journey in a nutshell, just not a very small nutshell. Sorry if that was really long, but that is basically up to where we are now. And like I said, looking forward, I'm going to take a little while to really like decide on like the next steps of my running journey. So to wrap the video up, I'm going to go into basically some key things that I've learned from my running journey, so that if you are starting your running journey or on your running journey, hopefully you can just take these away with you. The first thing is, running is meant to be tough. You are going to have runs where you are thinking, oh my goodness, why is this so hard? It is meant to feel like that. It is pushing you, it is challenging you, but that is how you see change. Remind yourself every time it feels tough when you're running, yes, this is tough, but I am tougher. Because if it was easy, everybody would do it, but they're not. You're doing it, and you are getting it done. That is just something that I really wish I'd have known, because I think in the beginning of a journey, when you start to feel a little bit uncomfortable, your body's natural reaction to that is to stop. If you feel uncomfortable, your body's like, oh, don't want to do this, we're going to go back to the comfort zone. You need to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Like, you have to break through that wall and keep pushing and challenging yourself in order to see the change and in order to increase your distance. And number 2 is that your trainers are make or break. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just make sure you find yourself a really fucking good pair of trainers, because they will be the reason that you keep running and you don't get injured. Number 3, rest is equally as important as your runs. Running is a lot of stress on the body, especially if you're doing long distance runs or you're training for a race. You need to be allowing yourself time to rest. And that does also mean that gym/weighted sessions are not rest days. They are still exercising, you are still training. I did used to use my rest days as weight training days, which is just so silly, because you're not allowing your body time to rest and recover. Number 4, like I mentioned with marathon number 1, fuel, fuel, fuel. Food is your best friend when you're running. Please do not be afraid to increase your calories. Your body needs more fuel to keep going. You will feel it on your runs if you're depleted and you're not eating enough. And number 5 is to run slow. I've already spoken about this, so I'm not going to bore you, but just run slow. And number 6 is, please celebrate every single win. I think a lot of the time with social media, there is a lot of people doing crazy running things. There are people doing ultra marathons left, right, and center. And sometimes that can make you feel that if you're doing a 10K, it's not an achievement, but it is. It really is. And that 10K that I did, that I spoke about earlier, to this day is probably one of my biggest achievements. Like, over the marathons, like that for me was such a monumental moment that I would view that as probably more important than the marathons that I did. So celebrate your small wins, live in that achievement, shout it from the rooftops. If you don't have any friends to tell, jump on the Strong Girl Society Facebook page, please post it and we will all cheer you on, because you deserve to be celebrated because you've done something amazing. And that concludes my updated running story. I think the last time I did this was before Paris, so we've had 2 marathons in between then, so I felt like it was time to do a bit of a refresh, but also I just wanted to kind of sit down and talk to you guys about my journey, because hopefully it shows you that even if you are going out on that first 5k and you're thinking, oh my goodness, like this isn't meant for me, I can't do this, like I'm never going to be a runner, you definitely are, like you definitely can. And I just wish that 2 years ago I'd have stuck with it, but you know what, everything happens for a reason. I'm glad that last year I started my running journey and stuck with it, because look at where we are now, and hopefully we have some more amazing running achievements to accomplish in the future. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this week's video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.